Hey everyone, welcome to the Vanderbloemen Leadership Podcast, where we help you build, run, and keep great teams. Thanks for being here. Let's dive in. Hey, well, welcome in. William, today we have an amazing topic that we are discussing. It's everyone's favorite, especially when you're leading a team.
It's Leviticus, isn't it?
Even better, numbers. We are talking about how you can keep a great team. How do you make a team that is willing to stay? You know, turnover rate is really high right now. I was just wondering if you have maybe a quick story or just some initial tips for our listeners who are leading teams about building a team that wants to stay.
Yeah, well, so the longer we do this podcast, the more you're going to get tired of me saying the same things. And I used to think I need to come up with something new to say, something creative to say. And then I read a great quote it's attributed to Aristotle from years ago. And the quote goes like this. Of course, he wouldn't have said it in English, right? But sure. The quote goes like this: the greater part of instruction is being reminded of the things you already know. That's a fancy way of saying everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten, but it's reminders. So number one reminder with retaining your team: people join a vision and a mission when they take a job. People leave a manager when they leave a job. Now, there are exceptions to that. Sometimes the vision shifts, right? Or the world shifts and the vision doesn't. You know, what was hip and cool, the world shifts, it's no longer hip and cool, and I want to go find the new hip and cool. Totally fine, right? Sometimes the philosophy changes. We served one church where they had a pretty massive theological shift. Not saying one was right or one was wrong, but they went from a very sort of biblical, evangelical, we'll not name the church, biblical evangelical view to one where it was more like, love wins and more open and that sort of thing. And that caused some people to leave. Yep. I don't know if that's a bad thing. If the ground shifts and the mission changes, you're going to lose people. And you need to know that before you make your own shift, right? But in general, people leave bad managers, not bad companies. Mm-hmm. So I am, when anybody decides to leave us, I'm forever saying, what do I learn about this? Yeah. I had this happen this week. Like, we had a parting of ways with somebody, and it's like, okay, how do we learn? What can we do to train our managers better to try and make sure that we're not the sole reason that we're parting ways? Sometimes we part ways. Yeah. This happens. Who knows? In the Bible, Paul and Barnabas split up, and I've had lots of people, well, this is why, and this is why, and this is why. The smartest biblical scholars I know say, we don't know why. Yeah. They just did. Jesus, I'm in the 1 year Bible we're in the Gospel of Mark now, and the first time Jesus gets in trouble in Mark is not with the religious authorities. It's with his friends. Yeah. And they're like looking for him. They can't find him. They're like, where is he? We've lost him. Where is this dude? And he was moving on to the next town. And the disciples came and said, "What? Can't we just stay here? Can't I just stay in the same job?" Yeah. And he said, No. My job is to go from town to town and village to village, preaching and teaching and healing. Yeah. And that's William's paraphrase. So sorry for literalists. I'm sure there's a better way to say it, but you can move around and be faithful. You don't have to stay in the same job. It is not, if you're in multi-site church, it's not one church, many locations. Okay, that's great. I've got lots of friends and clients that have that in their logo or slogan somewhere. Now, instead of one church, many locations, what if we started to say one kingdom, many locations, right? So the moving around is not inherently bad. Mm-hmm. But if you start to see regular turnover, well, maybe it's time to start looking at, is there a management problem? I'm going to get in trouble. Can I get in trouble?
Get in trouble.
I'm actually pretty good at getting in trouble. Like 15 years ago, so a long time ago, I'm just starting to write a blog, and I was writing something for Forbes. Maybe it was 15 years ago. You won't find it on the internet anymore. And I was talking about this principle. And it was before Travis Kelce. Travis, don't come after me. You'll win in the fight. There's no need to.
The Swifties too.
Right. We're about to go to a bad spot. And I said, it was when Taylor was kind of moving from boyfriend to boyfriend over and over and over. And it's like, well, what's the common denominator here? And boy, I got backlash from most of America on that. I should not have said that, right?
The Swifties are vicious.
Well, no, they were probably right. I shouldn't pick on somebody. Totally get it. That's my fault. Dumb, young, said the wrong thing. But in business, it is true.
Yeah.
We have one client, they need us to find an exec pastor, and I'm like, well, I've learned to ask how long did the last person stay? How long did the person before that stay? And we had a really great church one time call us, and they needed an exec pastor, and they had called us like the year before for the same thing and chose to do it on their own, and that's fine, whatever. But then I said, so in the last, let's just say 7 years, how many exec pastors have you had? And they said, 8. I'm like, wow, you just keep picking the wrong person. Maybe not.
Yeah.
And that's a hard truth because leaders are listening to this. But the whole point of this podcast is to help you build, run, and keep a great team. And man, oh man, geez, what I am trying so hard to learn is, William, it's about the log in your own eye, not the splinter in the other.
Yeah.
So if you don't take anything else away from this podcast, it's people join a cause or a mission. People leave a bad manager. So if you've got a lot of turnover going on, there are a lot of very real turnover reasons that are happening, and we can do that in another podcast.
Sure.
A lot of data-driven things that are happening that we study all the time that are not related to people. But at the end of the day, I think the beginning of solving your turnover problem is saying, managers, look in the mirror. And if you're leading managers, what are you as a leader not passing on to them? Because they're learning what they see.
Yep.
So sorry, boy, that's a rosy way to start the podcast. I got the Swifties mad, and everybody's turning off now because it's like they're telling me I'm a bad manager.
That's right. Well,
I guess we're done.
Well, let's view it from this point of view. Maybe the leader is in a good spot, but what would you almost value more when it comes to turnover? And would you say it's more so reflective of bad hiring or bad development, or would you say maybe flip it, a low turnover rate? Would you say that's more reflective of you went good hiring or good development within the position itself?
Yeah, there's so many good questions in there. My friend Dave Ramsey told me one time, it's a little different. He's been kind of a big brother and mentored me, and he's been a client for a long time. But he told me one time as we were early in building the business, he said, William, I don't know how it's going to be for you. I think it's going to be somewhat true. But for us, every customer satisfaction problem is actually a sales problem. I'm like, what do you mean, Dave? And he said, well, customer satisfaction, when there's a problem, it's usually because there's an unmet expectation.
Yeah.
And the salespeople created that unreasonable expectation.
Yep.
So it's like when I was interviewing at a church one time and they were telling me to be their pastor. This is 100 years ago. This is when the world was in black and white and there were subtitles because you couldn't hear, people talking.
Yep.
And they were telling me about all the children's ministries they have and all the great, young families that are involved and all this. And they were building their new church. They were moving. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking at the church plans while we're, interviewing. Beautiful, beautiful structure. I mean, just timeless. And no playground. Like, where's the playground? They're like, oh, we hadn't thought of that. So then when you dig a little bit, it's like, so how many kids do you really have?
Oh.
Yeah. And I don't think they were being devious or deceptive.
Sure.
So the thing about search committees, even pastors, the thing about leaders is they believe in their organization more than anybody else in the organization.
Yep.
They better. If they don't, then you got to think about things. I mean, like, I'll pick on Dave a little bit and you can Ramsey, and, I think I'd say this if you're sitting right here. When we used to do searches for him, his board, his lead team that he really trusts would say, let's not show Dave the candidate till we're sure it's the right one because he loves everyone and we'll just try and talk them into coming to the company. Yeah. And our job's to be the filter. And I think leaders of faith-based organizations, like, I hope you didn't sign up for the job for the money because in faith-based organizations, if you signed up for the money, you're either really dumb or you're a crook or both. But it's not about the money, right?
Exactly.
It's about let's call it the retirement benefits on the other side of the river.
The eternal.
That's it. That's it.
Internally hiring.
But I think I've done this so many times. I try and tell people how great it is to work here, and I make promises that can't be fulfilled. And then when you get to the real thing, when we've talked before about nobody should walk down the aisle with Rachel and wake up next to Leah.
Yeah.
Like it should not be a, one of the funniest verses in the Bible. Jacob wakes up and it was Leah.
Oh my.
You're right. So I think if you can create realistic expectations when you're hiring,
Yep.
then, reality won't be jarring. It won't feel like a bait and switch. Life Church, I've been many times to study their hiring process. I mean, for as long as I've been doing this, I've been going up there. And I'll never forget the first time I went up there, they were bringing in their top 100 applicants, and they're going to whittle it down, which is unbelievable. And this was a long time ago before they were really big. And Pastor Craig, who is just one of the best leaders in the country,
Yep.
And most genuine, he literally only spent about 5 to 7 minutes with the entire group of 100, and that was it. And I thought, well, you just missed your recruiting chance. I mean, you could have sat down and had dinner and worked the room, and everybody would want to be here. But it only was later on that I realized, you know what he was doing? He was giving them a realistic expectation of how often they would see him if they came to work there.
Yeah.
And that's fair.
Yep.
And that's honest.
Yep.
And if you give honest expectations in the interview, then you're going to have a lot better reaction when people have to deal with the reality of what it's like to work there. So is there a tie to turnover in hiring? I think absolutely so. Mm-hmm. And if at my heart, I'm a sales guy. When I was a pastor, I still want to overpopulate heaven. Like I want to talk people into coming to know Jesus. That's not great for hiring because I'll just talk anybody into coming to work. I mean, I'll talk that tripod. You know what? We need a tripod like you. Like
this mic.
Exactly. And I think if pastors will just calm down a little bit and remember that it is the Lord God who staffs the church.
Yes.
It's not Vanderbloemen. It's not a staffing company. The Lord Jesus is managing the chessboard, and he'll make it work. And if you will just be honest with people on the front end, when they get into the real job, your turnover will drop some, right? Mm. So that's one thing that comes to mind. Now, let's say you do a good job with setting expectations. Yep. What can you do to increase your retention? Well, I think one thing you can do is learn yourself and then learn your employees. Mm. Now, I'll give you a concrete example, and then I'll be quiet so you can ask good questions. We've worked hard to learn communication skills.
Yes.
Maybe we can drop in the podcast, if you're watching, a picture of the blocks that we use, the little Lego set that shows what kind of personality type you have. And we've broken it into 4 main blocks: red, yellow, blue, green. And it's like kind of like the DISC inventory, DISC. And on each of those blocks, it says, what's the saying for this block? Like red is a D on the DISC. That's a leader that gets things done, that really is just about task. They probably sometimes walk all over a relationship because they're trying to get stuff done. Don't mean harm by it. And the block that's red for that kind of person says, be brief, be bright, be gone.
Yep.
And so each of these 4 blocks, we were taught by a really great teacher. There's a time that's the right amount of time to communicate with each of these kinds of people.
Okay.
So if you're dealing with someone with this red block, about 60 seconds. If you can get it down to 60 seconds, they're going to receive that well. So I won't bore you with all of it, but like one of the blocks, the highly relational people, the people you like, if I'm sick, I really want that pastor to come to the hospital. Yes. Like they actually really do want to be there.
Yes.
20 minutes. 20 minutes. And if you don't have 20 minutes, don't talk to them. Like one of the biggest mistakes I made in a Christmas season, one of my first Christmases as senior pastor, was to try to go to every Sunday school class Christmas party. That's old school talk.
Yeah.
But I thought if I could just drop in all of them, I'll see everybody in the church real fast. Well, dropping in for 5 minutes and leaving was more harmful to a lot of people than just going to one party and actually. But if you as a manager can figure out who on your staff is wired how, and then serve them in that way, And I think we've talked about Caroline Smith, who's just an amazingly lovely person. She's going to have a way better place in heaven than you or I will. She worked here for a long, long time and is raising children now, and just fabulous person. She was one of those 20-minute people.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a long time to realize she would rather me ice her phone call than take it and have to get off in 3 minutes. And I'd get to where I'd just ice it and text her back and say, I'll call you when I've got a little more time.
Yeah.
And she's like, I feel seen.
Yeah. Feel known.
I feel known. And lo and behold, retention stuck.
Yeah.
But that's really hard work for a manager to say, okay, how am I wired? I'm kind of be gone. So I know I've got to get a little extra energy up to sit down. Like the block that is really hard for me is the blue one, which is kind of like engineers, very precise and all this. And you know how long you have to talk to them?
I don't.
Until it's right. Could be a minute.
Could be
3 days.
Yeah.
But learning that, like, and it doesn't have, it can be Enneagram, it can be Working Genius, it can be all of them. We're actually finishing up a huge research project on how a lot of these interface and how you find the right job based on that. But if a leader can figure out just one common language among your staff so you know how to communicate with each other, if you will serve them by communicating in the way that they are wired, you'll keep them longer. And it even gets down to past length of time you talk, how you reward them. I've got some super high performers on our team that I would love to say, come up here, we're going to cheer for you, we're going to give you a trophy, we're going to give you and they would rather shrivel up and die.
It's like when it's your birthday at the restaurant.
Yes, happy birthday. You know, some people love that, some people don't.
Yep.
And that's the art of leadership.
Yeah.
It's not just tell them what to do. You want to do that? Go run a manufacturing plant. You want to work with volunteers and service-oriented people? You got to do the hard work of figuring out how people are wired so you can reward them appropriately. Some people like titles more than money. You can actually give somebody a raise without spending $1 if they're a title person.
Yeah.
You now have this. Now, I wouldn't suggest that. If you're going to give a title change, you need to make a compensation change as well. But study yourself, study your people, and figure out how to serve them based on how they're wired.
Yeah.
And I think you'll increase your retention.
Yeah. That's serving people well. It's what leadership's all about. One kind of final question is, is there any common denominators that you've seen in the development of team members of teams that have low turnover rates?
Totally. And I'm still trying to learn it.
Yeah.
Not the expert, but, like I think we've said somewhere in this podcast before, one of the very top complaints that people have and why they leave their job is, I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
I don't know what the job is, right? And in ministry, that's kind of hard because a lot of church work is other duties as necessary.
Yep.
Right. But I think if people can understand what the win is, even if it's a short term, what's the 90-day win?
Yep.
If they can know what the goal is, like me with running, I guess we should say jogging because I'm pretty slow. If I just go out and plod around, it'll get done, but nothing real is going to happen. You tell me there's a marathon and I'm running it and there's the date and here's a training plan and here's how to get it done. All of a sudden I'm in better shape.
Yep.
And I think most team members work that way.
Yeah.
If they like their work at all, if they are just trying to get 9 to 5 and draw a check, that's a whole different podcast.
Yes.
So then right underneath that, if they know what the win is, the question then becomes, how can I as a leader give them the tools, resources, time that they need to get that done?
Yep.
And, a lot of times we tell people to go get stuff done and then don't give them the resource.
Yeah.
So I think that would be sort of what I'm trying to focus on is how do you, Jared, know what the win is for you? And how do I make sure I'm giving you what you need to get that done? And if it's not a material thing, like when we started this podcast, my son, oldest, was our first intern.
Okay.
And we called him Beta. He was at Texas A&M, and freshmen are called fish in the Corps, so he was the beta fish.
Yep.
He was the beta intern. And I said, Matthew, we're going to start a podcast. This was 2013.
Okay.
So this is ancient. And he said, that's cool. Where are you going to do it? I said, I'm going to do it in the podcast studio. He said, we have a podcast studio? I said, yes, we do. He said, where's that? And I said, you see that broom closet? I said, yeah. I said, you're going to turn it into a podcast studio. He's like, okay. How do I do that? I know the job. How do I have the resource?
Yep.
Sometimes the answer is as simple as what I gave him. I said, okay, you got $200 to spend at Home Depot, and there's this thing called YouTube.
Yep.
Go figure it out.
Now you have ChatGPT.
Now you have ChatGPT. But so you don't have to know the answer to help them. But if you can equip them and say, you can figure it out.
Yep.
Here's a way to figure it out. Here's some money to go spend. We were shoestring budget. We didn't even have air conditioning in that thing. We would never been able to do video podcasts. It would have been banned by YouTube. So, but if you know what you're supposed to do, and if you're getting the resource you need to do that, then you're going to enjoy your job more. And if you as a leader can do that, you're going to keep your people longer. And if you can keep your people longer, then you won't have to hire me, and you'll save time and momentum and money. And frankly, it would make me happy if you kept your people longer. My business development team's going to hate me for saying that, but you want the church to go farther and faster, which is all we're about.
Yep.
Then get the people problems down.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to do that is to retain your very best people.
Yep. I love it. Well, here's what I know is that if you set the goal and if you equip your people correctly, you can keep a great team in 2025. Thanks again for joining us on the Vanderbloemen Leadership Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're looking for more leadership resources, you can find us at vanderbloemen.com and on socials at Vanderbloemen. We'll see you again next week where we continue discussing how to build, run, and keep great teams.